for coming to Black Presence, an intimate discussion with Unheard Voices, the Salinas edition, to show us the history of Blackness in Salinas, the present time, and leading up to the scenes of the Salinas Juneteenth celebration this Saturday, June 17th at 1 p.m., and the future legacy, me, of what the future looks like and what it holds. Let's start off with Mr. Chuck Chambers.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. I was asked to come here today to talk about some of the history of African Americans in Salinas. I moved to Salinas in 1974 from Southern California, and I sort of had some prepared questions that I will answer. And I had to write it down because at my age, you have a tendency to forget. And I'm not ashamed of the fact that I wrote it down so that I can remember and to be able to share with you some information. First of all, as I said, I came here in I moved to Salinas in 1974. I moved there with my former wife, my 3 children, and a dog. And I was employed at CTF Soledad prison as a correctional officer. And the question was, what made you stay? I liked the area and the people, small town atmosphere with just enough country living thrown in. My church family made me and my family feel welcome. We made a few new friends. What were and are you doing in the community to inspire you to stay? My church family inspired me, and I was able to grow in my biblical knowledge and my relationship with God. I also began to actively participate in organizations like the NAACP and other groups. I was active in my kids' schools by giving presentations on Black history, joining the Affirmative Action Advisory Committee at the Salinas City School District, and the Minority Isolation Committee at the school district, as well as the Affirmative Action Committee at Hartnell College. Here's some information that I really wanted to share with you. The question is, what was the community like when I first moved here? It was a small but thriving community of approximately 70,000 people, mostly white, many Hispanics, and some Blacks. There was covert racism and overt racism. There was a site south of King City named Nigger Hill. I don't know how or why it got its name, but something significant must have happened there. Blacks had and were struggling for equality, just like other places in the U.S. There was discrimination in housing, hiring, and advancement practices. Firestone, Peter Paul Candies, Spreckles Sugar Refinery, McCormick Shilling Spices, Fort Ord, and Soledad Prison were the major employers of Black folk. Even though agriculture was and is the prominent employer in Salinas Valley, not very many Blacks were offered the opportunity to partake. There were also many Black-owned businesses over the years. Herman and Walter Simpson and Tommy Beasley had auto body shops. Lord Luther McDaniels had card rooms and many other business enterprises. Dolores Higgins, whom we just lost a few days ago, had Delray Beauty Shop. Chuck Rogers owned Rogers Upholstery. Sir Page's Beauty Salon. Happy to Be Nappy Beauty Salon. Friend of mine, Chicago Moe's, he was from Chicago. He opened a place called Chicago Moe's Hot Dog Cafe. There was a club for young people to go and dance and hang out, mainly Black young people. There were 5 different barbecue and other restaurants nearby. Sam Singley's barbershop and shoe repair shop was there where currently Steinbach Center is located. Mrs. Iola Moore owned and operated a shoe shine stand on Soledad Street, to name a few. Many of the women worked as domestic laborers in various white homes. There were 7 active Black churches: the NAACP Salinas branch, Women's Social Club, and individual groups like the Concerned Citizens for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. took active roles in providing programs and activities and services for the Black community. Next question is, what changes have taken place? All of the aforementioned businesses have closed except the prison. Most of the older Black folks have died or moved away. Many of the subsequent generations moved away because of the lack of opportunity here. I have seen the relationships of the people improve, that there is seemingly not as much racism and prejudice here. The various cultures and races get along. Next, what is your take on the visibility pertaining to the Black community? The main thing is that there is no real sense of Black community anymore. If you, as a stranger, comes to Salinas and you ask someone you see, where's the Black community, they can neither point north, south, east, or west. All of the churches have lost their robust congregations after the close of Fort Ord, and more recently, after COVID. There is no gathering place for Black folk as there are for other nationalities. We sort of live in family silos, especially my generation. Next question is, how can Blacks in Salinas further develop, growth, wealth, youth, prosperity? Even though in today's environment with the extremely high cost of living, Black-owned businesses must be developed. I am only aware of maybe 5 now. Black youth must go to school and get degrees in order to compete for existing jobs. They should learn to speak Spanish to enhance their job opportunities. Black developers must be invited in to build affordable homes and new businesses, including banks and finance companies. The Black youth and young adults, especially men, must become more visible and participate in local politics by running for offices at city and county levels. 2 or 3 of the young ladies that do hair braids should get together and open their own shops and not just operate in their homes. Young Black men should learn the solar industry and car repair and body work and open their own shops. No one is going to help us but us. Future-focused community support. We must always be aware of our legacy. What are we leaving behind? What did we teach our children to better prepare them for future life and opportunities? We must lead by example. One cannot expect the children to flourish if your example is not working, getting high, sitting and playing video games, taking selfies, talking loud, and saying nothing.
Preach.
Ooh.
Preach.
Life is short. From the womb to the tomb, from the cradle to the grave, life is short, and then you die. We must encourage our youth, give them hope for tomorrow. It's not promised, but you can live in expectation that it will come and prepare. Past-related strength in the community activists. There were individuals in the community that took an active part in the support of the Black community. People such as Dolores Higgins, David Powell, Norma Phillips, Fred Holt, Mattie Thompson, Reverend Al Davis, Josephine Moores, Mr. and Mrs. Tebow, Mr. and Mrs. Bouchard, Boutte family members, Mr. and Mrs. Littleton, Valerie Golden, Will and Jack Simon, Mel Abdalasis, including Hartnell representatives, Fred Anderson, Walter Rice, Cindy Obenchain, and Hank Hughes, and Cecil Rhodes, and many more. The group of very smart and committed folks that has sponsored this event and the upcoming Juneteenth events are those whose names will be added to this list of those who cared enough to give their time and talent to lead in our community. Next question was, how should we do more? More money, legal support, legislations. My answer is vote, vote, vote. Run for office, vote, vote, vote. You see, change comes from within. Shoulda and woulda can't change a thing. Pay your taxes, then get involved. Attend PTA, school board, city council, and board of supervisors meetings. Go and sit in court, in a courtroom, and see how it works. Most of all, thank God for what you have. What are you willing to do? Now, I'm too old to march, I'm just saying, but I can pray. I can give a few dollars. I can encourage those who can and support those who are stepping up. Individual responsibilities for Blacks to support one another, and how? Reverend Jesse Jackson once said, never look down on a man unless you're picking him up. Show love and respect for your fellow man, no matter his color or his condition. Homelessness is real, folks. Give to those in need. And when you see somebody in the store, say hi to folks. You'd be surprised how it will affect their day. I want to end with this quote. Let us put our minds together and see what life we can make for our children. Lakota Chief Sitting Bull. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chuck Chambers, for letting us know the history of Salinas, its Black presence, and the roots of what we need to learn. With that, we have the presence of what we're doing now. Miss Asia Guillory.
Well said. I'm scared now to follow. But thank you for setting the tone. I got some good notes here. Thank you all for being here. I want to thank the co-coordinator, Ms. Kendra, for being here. She's done so much with Juneteenth. We were out this morning in the church parking lot and the security guy called on us. And I want to thank my son who's been catching the other end of Juneteenth. Ain't no biscuits or nothing at home. So I want to just open up with paying appreciations to those folks who support myself and this work, and thank you all for being here. I came to Salinas in 2005. I'm originally from Oakland. I came to school here at CSU Monterey Bay, and what I shared the first time we did our demo, I couldn't afford to live anywhere else, to tell the truth. I was paying $675 for a studio on John Street, and I was working 3 jobs at the time as a recent college graduate. So that's what really led me to Salinas. I had looked in Seaside and Castroville and Marina, but affordability was the main thing, and I think that stands true today. Once I finished at CSUMB, I began working there, and I was always involved in service learning. And as a sophomore, I was introduced to the Chinatown community, where I was then handing out crack packets with the Monterey County AIDS Project and John the 23rd. And since then, I have continuously, there's been a magnetic pull there, because to be quite honest, that's where all the Black people were. I saw more black people in Salinas' Chinatown than I had seen anywhere, given the community that I'm from. So there was something very kindred about that. And the other thing that really struck with me is the people who were serving there did not look like the individuals who were on the receiving end of those services. And that's also another thread that there is a pony outside. I have tried, y'all, but there's a pony.
It's a mule.
It's a mule. Are 40 acres with that? Because we at the right place. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm trying, but you see the furry. Okay, back to edit. All righty. As I was saying, so advocacy has been really important to me since I was, 20-something years old. And like I mentioned, Chinatown, the Chinatown area, I got involved with service learning community service in that area. While working at CSUMB, I was involved with the Black Students United Club and served as an advisor. But while I was a student there, I was also involved with the Black Students United Club. So a lot of my foundations of leadership came from working with peers and came with working with faculty and staff at the university, which is very different than being in the community trying to get an event done. Being in Salinas on John Street, and if you know where I'm talking about, there are 2 hotels. So here I am, 20-something, with a lot of activity on that corner. So I didn't need to go out Friday night. All I do is look out the window. It was some activity. And again, this continues to be a thread within Salinas' history. Whether it's addiction, whether it's the black market, there's activities that are happening there. After I had my child, I also began to be involved with the PTA and had several instances from the charter school that my son was at, getting involved and trying to work collaboratively with parents who didn't look like me and parents who didn't understand the struggles that my child may face and how he shows up in the classroom and what his capabilities were in comparison to what was offered to other students there. I know our time is limited, but I could go into story after story looking for summer programs. If I name the YMCA, him being the only one there. If I name that Montessori school that was down off the 68, him being the only one there. So I'm wanting richer opportunities for learning from my son. I early on began to see that there was very limited to no representation when it came to advocacy in the educational system. The other thing that I'll share is civic engagement, going back to what Mr. Chambers was sharing about voting. The opportunity was presented to me by Helen Rucker, who many of you may know. She's all about voting rights and advocacy. And she shared that you can work at the Monterey County Elections Office and you can get paid all day. You work a long day, but you get $136 to meet and greet the people in your precinct and in your community. And I thank her for that. Because when I went to that training, again, I was one of few people who looked like me in that room. And here, this was a well-kept secret that you could get $130-something to work all day to do what? Express your civic engagement. Mm-hmm. And it's not about picking a political side, but it's about making that accessible to those people who are in your community. So I've continued to serve with the Monterey County elections, and I've continued to learn a lot more about the districts that are represented within Salinas, and there are sprinkles of black folks everywhere. Going back to what Mr. Chambers was sharing as well, we are out here. I just want to share. I'm a nerd, and I was doing a lot of research. And according to the 2020 census, and Kendra and I are going to present this eloquently, but there's not really more black folks in Seaside than there are in Salinas. According to the 2020 census, there are only 12 more black folks, and that was 2020. And I'm sure somebody died and people didn't have some babies since then. Hello. So going back to housing affordability, going back to the jobs that you shared that exist. We've got Monterey County over there. We've got hospitals, 2 hospitals over here. So we have been seeing this pattern. I've been seeing this pattern of folks that may be living and serving in this community, but being black in other communities. And what is so poignant to me to share is that if we don't have those foundations, if it's not in your church, and we were at the churches today, Kendra and I could tell you, those populations are dwindling. Where else can we show up and be black and loud and proud publicly? We don't have a place like that. So Juneteenth serves as a vehicle, as the beginning, the foundation of one event once a year where we can show up and support those struggles that you shared, and those accomplishments that we've made and the contributions that we've made to this great country, and realize that our past does have some troubled waters, but there's also an ocean of opportunity out there. So I've digressed, but I do want to say we are at Grocery Outlet. I'm going to tell you where to find some black people. You want to know? Okay, I'm going to tell you. We are at Grocery Outlet. We are at Safeway on North Main. We saw a few of them at Compass Church today. It was a whole bunch out there. But I want to say that when you do see your folks, what I feel is invaluable is witnessing and recognizing. It don't have to be a whole shakedown. I'll shake them down. If it's a head nod, if it's just a friendly smile. And we have to start with recognizing and creating spaces for visibility and dialogue with our people. The years that I've lived here, I have seen an increase. We got a whole new housing development on Creek Bridge. See a lot of black folks over there. We've had several housing and urban development projects that have been built in Salinas since I've lived here. We're over there. And sadly, we are still in Chinatown. I can sit in Chinatown. I hold some pop-up healing spaces. I was a case manager out there. I volunteer for the garden. And consistently, I have seen waves and droves of black people come and go, come and go. And some of these folks are relatives of people who have long roots and histories here, and some of them have just been dropped by the wayside of human services and opportunities and addiction, mental health. And there's a cycle that they continue to disenfranchise those folks who are what I call vulnerably resilient, because they're still here. Despite all the challenges, whether it's criminal, whether it's mental health, physical health, low income, undereducated, they're still here. I've seen love expressed more deeply and richly with people who have little to nothing than I have with folks who own fancy luxury cars and are homeowners. I've witnessed it day in and day out for 2.5 years. So we have a presence here, and going back to what Mr. Chambers was saying, this unspoken understanding of speaking to each other and seeing the light within each other and recognizing that even though we're not related, that's still my brother, that may still be my sister. And when you see somebody that's downtrodden and looks all homeless, know that that's somebody's child. That may be somebody's parent. So I'll switch gears, and I will just talk about the activism that really fueled me was after, again, being a parent and having to withstand some incidents that my child endured, and writing the Monterey County Office of Education, going to the superintendent's office, showing up at those school board meetings, because we got a lot to say, but the meetings are at 5 o'clock on a Wednesday, and I'm tired, and my feet hurt, and did you take the chicken out the freezer, and all of that. But it takes consistency, and it takes, you have to really take care of yourself, because it weighs you down. These meetings are not set up to be accessible. You got 2 minutes. You got to voice your concern in 2 minutes. Your concerns are like novels. So how do you eloquently, and also this whole facade of not showing up as the angry black fill in the blank, but get your needs met, and to also let people know that you're serious. Because when these incidents happen, like the doll that got ran over, and they had all this spectacle, and I'm sitting out there and I saw more black parents at that meeting than I've ever seen in the years that I've lived here. But where they at now? No one was getting names and numbers and addresses. And I'll say shame on me. I'm trying to have some humility when I show up in these spaces. Like you said, you have to demonstrate it. I can give out a whole checklist of things that you can do to be an advocate in your community and organize and show leadership skills. I got to demonstrate that. And I do get tired, and I have to eat, I have to go to work, all of those things. So we have to also be mindful that there's this interwoven story, especially if you're a parent and your child is at a predominantly non-black, or they are a minority within a minority in the school system. You've got to show up differently. You've got to be supportive. You've got to have that talk with them. There's a way that you have to show up when you're in these meetings with administrative folks or any situation with power, whether it's the city council, whether it's a PTA meeting, whether it is a march. I was out there and my legs was hurting too. However you show up, to know your rights and to know how to be, how to persevere. So that's been That's been really what has fueled my activism. Juneteenth happened by happenstance. I'm not gonna sit up here and tell you I've been plotting and planning Juneteenth. No, that's not how it happened. That's not how it happened. I got hoodwinked into this. No, I'm gonna say that and delete. But Juneteenth, the more that we have planned, we have learned and we have evolved. And I will say one thing that is really important for me to share, being that I live in Salinas, given this misnomer there's no black people there, given that we used to have these celebrations and they've kind of fizzled out. Nothing has been done the first time. This is just spirit, motivation, innovation. It's in our DNA. So I wouldn't approach this saying nobody's done anything black in Salinas. And then I meet Mr. Chambers, and then Kendra has the idea to go to the Historical Society. And again, divine timing. We're learning about the mulatto brother who was running a ferry in the early 1800s over here in Marina, Paul Lazaire's ferry. And when you start unearthing these truths, these histories, you're reignited. I personally am reignited to say it's been done already. It's been done already. They've been barbecuing and having celebrations. They just didn't need permits to do it. Right? It's been done already. They had barbershops. The brother who was cutting hair, nobody knew he owned it, so it wasn't a threat. You see what I'm saying? So I think there's just all this miseducation or re-education that needs to happen, and it starts with this oral history. It starts with us having safe spaces to be able to talk and be ourselves with one another. Yeah, I had the do-rag on at the church. That's probably why I scared you guys. Said, who's the sister running up on the cars with the do-rag? But it was 9 o'clock in the morning. If we have these opportunities to say, hey, I see your church has 200 members. We're trying to organize this event. Right? We had to build trust. It's like all this back work that has to happen. It takes too much time and investment. We just trying to get the word out. So that's been a lesson. You have to be patient. Things take time, right? And so I'm rambling, but I also want to just get back to this idea of legacy. And I want to get back to this idea of being involved in your community. I'm sure all of us know someone who does a whole lot of this. As my grandfather says, big talkers and little doers. We all know someone. Have them get involved, challenge. We have to challenge ourselves and we have to challenge them. If it's not city council, they're Tuesday at 4 o'clock. Those meetings go for like 3.5 hours. Put it on YouTube. You don't need to be engaged the whole time, but see what they're discussing. There's thousands, almost hundreds of thousands of dollars in Salinas for development. There's budget meetings that are happening. No one like us is sitting at these tables having these conversations. Oh, Lord. You know, and I'll use these examples of like the sister who was on Hardin Ranch who had the bus shelter, and it drove me to crazy damn near. The fact that they removed the whole bus station because one black woman is sitting at the bus stop. That's a crime against humanity in some regards. But if everybody's just driving past the sister, oh, well, too bad, she homeless. And no one speaks up and no one takes this time to find out, okay, when is the MST Transportation Community Meeting? That sucker's Monday at 9 in the morning. Who can go to that meeting? If you're working, you cannot make it to that meeting. But you know what? How do I write a letter? How can I send an email? It takes time, and that's through information sharing, that's through community building, and it has to happen, sadly, grassroots. Some people believe that it's happening on social media. Somebody's observing and watching all of that as well. So when I go back to legacy and when I go back to the future, Juneteenth serves as that opportunity to celebrate something that has not happened in Salinas in a long time. And our hope is that it won't just be a once-a-year event. Our hope is that we continue to cultivate opportunities for not just us being able to be in community, but there is a gift that we have to offer when we share our history, when we share our culture, when we share our food, when we share our music. There's some real healing that I think that can happen in that. And I've shifted because when I first started, it's like, for us, by us, we need us. But then we think about it, we're living in a community with 161-something thousand people. And I've heard ballet folklorico, I've seen the taiko drums, and like I said, shame on me that it took 13 years for some African drums to come to Salinas, because it's not impossible to do. With a little time, planning, and money, it can happen. So the whole community benefits from seeing us fully express our blackness, our truth, our legacy. It's a win-win. And it's not really a competition. I think that's something that I keep getting these little sprouts of this. We might live in a predominantly Latino white community, but I'm gonna tell you firsthand, and this is recorded, who supports us the most? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Aisha Dillard. The present and the truth. And being the legacy future as a youth, being a black woman was very hard for me to grasp growing up in Salinas, California. Finding spaces, I had to create them. Finding roles and events, I had to hold them. And so I know that the key is to repeat history, to learn from the elders, to grow with the present times and the Middle Ages, and make sure that I bring all the youth with me. Speaking of which, we have our facilitator, an amazing youth black man in the community, to ask some questions. Keyshawn Robinson, everyone, knowledge.
Oh my God. Well, first starting off, I just want to say it's really a presence to be, or it's a blessing to be in you guys' presence. I'm learning a lot just by listening, and I think that's the problem with a lot of our youth nowadays. I think we forget that everybody wants to teach, but nobody gives people time to listen. Everybody wants to be heard, but not everybody gets listened to. And I think that's kind of where it starts, where it's like, okay, well, we stop listening to the elders because it's like, okay, well, we make money fast ways and we're doing it this way, but we forget the knowledge and stuff that you guys been through and experienced. And I feel like that's helped a lot. And just being able to, be here and listen to the wonderful things like Juneteenth event, like I found this out and I'm like, wow, it's a beautiful thing. I actually had the ability to perform for the Juneteenth event last year, and I'm performing again this year. And I just want to say I really do appreciate what you're doing. A question of mine that I had was, where do you think, as far as speaking on our future and moving along, how important do you think the education is geared in towards trying to figure out where we can benefit and where we can grow? Because it looks like we're all getting, or a majority of us is getting stopped when it comes to education. For me, I went to Hartnell. I had the luxury of going to Hartnell, and I was the only black person there. When I was sitting in these classes and they would ask me like, what's your major? And my major was, well, if you know how to do it, I'm gonna know how to do it. I don't have time to sit and only be one major because there's only one of me, which means that I have to be the best in this class because I represent everybody. So I think my question was, where do you think our future lies and who should be teaching our education? Should we only rely on the teachers that's been teaching it, in these schools? Should we have somebody accountable to set aside and be like, listen, we need you teaching, these type of financial literacy so that when we go out into the real worlds, we'll have an outlook and we won't be so lost. What is your approach on the educational field?
Oh, you're looking at me.
Look at you first.
Elders first, and the present, then the
You
legacy
started
future.
first, now you gotta keep
Okay,
Mr. Chambers.
that's an excellent question. Just to go back a little bit, during slavery, we weren't allowed to learn to read and write. The opportunity to read and write took a lot of struggle for us to get there. A lot of times I think that's just taken for granted about where we've come from. In education now, we have to understand, and there are educators here. I'm not an educator, I'm a learner. I love to learn. But kind of like to teach a little bit as I go along. To me, in today's world and in today's society, we have to teach our youth, first of all, to be who they are. There's so many times that we're put into little cubby holes and we're told by someone else who we are or who we're to be. When I was growing up, you were told to get a job. My advice now is to get a career. There's a difference. Think about where you want to be, not where you are. Because if you're just focusing on where you are, you don't really need to be educated on today because you're already experiencing that. What do you want to experience? Where do you want to go? What do you want to be? What do you want to be when you grow up? And the growing up the growing up process is different now. When you leave out the door, your parents have to tell you the talk. They have to tell you the talk. When you have children, you better tell them to talk, because I don't see this changing anytime really, really soon. I wish it would. Where I grew up at in the South, I grew up in West Virginia. We didn't have the talk, but we did have white and black bathrooms. We did have to sit in the back of the bus. There were places that we could not go. When you were called a name, you really didn't react because of consequences. Nowadays, you don't have to really experience that kind of overt racism, but you're experiencing things today that you have the opportunity. I mean, there's a 4-year college here. There are 2-year colleges here. There's opportunity to get an education. And my hope is that more of our young people will take advantage of it. My father had a 6th grade education, but I never wanted for a meal because he always had a job. We don't have to have parents your age when you become a parent, or I don't know if you are or not.
I'm a father
but
too.
You are a father too. Wonderful. Be a good one. Just a little bit of advice.
Definitely.
Teach your children that they must work to take care of themselves and be responsible to their family and to the community. You can't just sit around, as I said in my presentation, you cannot sit around getting high and playing video games and expect someone to walk in and offer you $100,000 a year job. It's not reality. Too many of our young men are still wanting to be rappers, and they're 55 years old and they ain't sold a record yet.
Oh.
I'm just saying.
Never too late.
When you're young, take the opportunity to go to school. STEM is the main thing, the STEM classes, but also understand that where we're going with solar, where we're going with battery-operated things, vehicles are not like me and others who were shade tree mechanics and could get in there and do all kinds of stuff to our vehicles. That day is past, because the electronics in these vehicles nowadays, you go to mess it around and you've just ruined an $85,000 vehicle just because you went in there with a can of WD-40 spraying where you shouldn't have sprayed. So we need to learn, young people need to understand that they have a place in society. Black Lives Matter. I was around during the Civil Rights Movement and everything. Black Lives Matter came along and said, I'm tired and I ain't taking this mess no more. The way our young men have gotten killed and murdered, some people refer to it, I'm a former police officer, real deal. But police shooting unarmed people, that ain't right. It's just not right. But so you have to always be aware of your surroundings, people walking in and shooting up places. Schools are not safe. Grocery stores are not safe. Movie theaters are not safe. Churches are not safe. We were coming to church this morning and we passed by the mosque in Salinas that had police there. So we have to understand the society we're in. And not, I don't like to always bring up politics, but the day that we're in politically, it's crazy. And the people that we're having to deal with and witness, it's shameful. And I understand. I mean, when you think of one of the greatest speeches ever made was Frederick Douglass, what to the American slave is your 4th of July? Mm-hmm. It's not that we're not aware of situations and circumstances and all that kind of stuff. It's just that we have to understand and always look forward, because what politics is trying to do to us today is take us back 50 years. And I'm telling you right now, black and white bathrooms, black and white, water fountains, sitting in the back of the bus is not fun. See, I was a rambunctious child. When my mom we'd get on a bus, I didn't have any better sense than to sit down in the first seat available. On more than one occasion, my mom had to literally jerk me out of that seat and say, we got to go back here and sit down. That never made sense to me.
And it never will.
And it never will.
And it never will.
It never will. But fortunately, you don't have to deal with that today. You can go on a bus and you can drive that fella. You can drive the bus.
Wow.
Sit where you want, on trains, everything. Education, loving each other, caring about each other. If you don't, if young people today, if you don't care about the elderly, oh man, you want to have a good time? Go and sit down next to somebody that's 90 years old and say, tell me about some of your experiences. And all I'm going to say is you better take lunch. And be ready. Because they have a lot to share. But see, the problem is nobody's asking. Nobody's asking. One of these days, if you live long enough, you're going to have that same kind of a story. So my suggestion is that get educated, go to school. Now, everybody doesn't belong in a classroom. See, because the same doctor and lawyer need somebody to deliver the paper that they have to keep notes on. Somebody has to be the technician for that computer. Somebody has to cook lunch.
I see.
So the classroom is not for everyone. Who was it? Booker T. Washington and George Washington Carver had the conversations about, how to do this. How can our black folks advance? They technology or just, doing everyday jobs. We still have that dilemma. But the thing is, we can't advance sitting on our butts. It's not going to happen. You can't expect somebody to hand you something that you don't deserve. If you don't work for it, the Bible says if you don't work, you don't eat.
Ooh.
I didn't write that, but that's what the Bible says. And I believe it because people need to understand that you can't go in this world and expect everything for nothing. I don't owe you a living. You don't owe me a living. If I don't earn it, should I have it? You know, the old men used to teach me one thing. They taught me one thing. You get one of three ways. You either earn it, somebody gives it to you, or you take it. When you take it, you know the consequences. When you earn it, you have a pride. You take care of it. If you earn the amount, the money to buy you a nice new car, how will you take care of that car? If someone gives you a car, are you going to treat it the same way?
Not exactly.
Not exactly, exactly. I'm done. I'd better stop.
Thank you so much. History, Mr. Chuck Chambers. President, Miss Asia?
There's this dangerous place called the internet. And I didn't grow up having access to it, but this generation, you have it at your fingertips. You got Google, you got Siri, you got all these other sources. And I would challenge anyone here, because I've done this, I set a timer for 15 minutes and Google like African royalty. Set a timer for 15 minutes, right? And start searching Black millionaires. The time that you spend on senseless idle, you know what, is the same time that we could be fertilizing our mind with all of the innovative contributions that we have made throughout the world, throughout the diaspora. Even if it's looking up a recipe on how to make jollof rice. Because, you know, I don't know if I'm going to spend $25 to get some, but I want to learn how to make it. And I can do that, enriching myself, my culture, my understanding. My child can do that as well by using the internet as a tool for knowledge. I want to say that we don't have to think about education in four walls and desks and tables. I was rolling around Salinas doing a lot of stuff. And I saw a group of folks at the park, and they were predominantly Spanish speakers, and they had some pamphlets, and it looked like an educational, communal opportunity. So we don't have to wait till we're in the classroom to do that. And I would challenge parents, and I myself have done this. So how many times has your child come back from school and they're learning about either the Russian Cold War, as my son shared, or Dia de los Muertos, and it's like, oh, well, are they teaching you all about Africa? What are you learning about Africa? What are you learning about Black American history? It takes us to also bring these gifts to the classroom. I'm gonna tell you that Salinas had, well, at the time that I met with some of them, it was about 20-something teachers in the Salinas Union High School District. And after this incident had occurred with my own son, we started talking with the superintendent. And I started hearing teachers almost in tears at Salinas, teachers who have been there for almost 20 years. Oh, when I come to work, y'all just don't understand. Oh, they give me all the bad kids, so even teachers themselves are inundated with another burden of responsibility to not just teach the curriculum and the standards, but because you're Black, oh, can you throw a little Black history in there too? And can you help Johnny because he keeps getting in trouble? And can you do this and can you do that? So you need to have your mind right. And you need to also bring whatever creative skills that you have to the classroom. But there's an added burden when you're there to show up as an educator. And then you have something like George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, keep the names going. And you still have to show up. And you still have to be present. And you still have to address that child who's either acting up for attention or acting up because they got other problems going on. You have to be 100% every day in the classroom. It's a lot of responsibility. So I was hearing this from Black teachers and thinking, well, what kind of support do they have? So a lot of times, and I'm one of them, these parents are like, well, what's your teacher doing? Your teacher need to be, a teacher's human. They can only handle so much in the day too. So we're putting this burden of Black history and education, and I know Dr. Kendra's doing ethnic studies, having to rewrite her classes. We've got a shift that's happening politically where they're saying woke is gonna die in Florida. All of this stuff is happening. Who's responsible? I'm gonna tell you, all of us are. I'm gonna say we all have a responsibility to do that. The other thing that I think is important when it comes to You were saying the future and what education is going to look like. I think we have to kind of shift this narrative of who is a teacher. That 90-year-old elder is a teacher, and that 9-year-old is a teacher. I think that, especially as a parent, going back to something you said with your mama snatching you off the bus and all this, we have to start, and my son is in the audience, we have to start building our kids up. Joy DeGruy, who wrote Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, has a YouTube video where she's sharing how a black mother talks about her own child at the back-to-school night. And sometimes we ourselves are doing damage. We ourselves have to acknowledge that we can cause harm in the home, and that we can stomp on some dreams, and that we can also, get off that damn video game, but at the same time, there are jobs that they could get, Ms. Chambers. They make pretty good amount of money, but they need to have a backup plan and not think that that's the only way. So I'm holding myself accountable to the best of my ability, and God knows my heart, but it starts in the home. We can't expect these kids to go to school for 8 hours and get all their needs met. It's not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen. It's putting opportunities available where they can see themselves, number one. It's that conversation about you respect everybody else's culture because you want people to respect your culture. That takes some time, and that takes some humility, believe me, especially when you don't see yourself a lot. I had the privilege of growing up in Oakland, and it was something black happening all the time. My child doesn't have that experience. So when I'm lecturing him about talking to JJ or whoever with his pants sagging, he don't get it because that has not been his experience. Where it's like, if something go down, you better call JJ, y'all better run. But at the same time, that's not his experience. So we have to also meet these youth where they're at. And we have to understand that this culture, especially Monterey County, is more like kumbaya, multicultural. It ain't all, what's up, black and proud. So we can't show up black and proud because people are gonna feel threatened by that. I'm not saying don't show up how you want to show up, but don't be surprised when you met with some resistance. So kids who also have not had representations of their culture and have not been immersed in black history, it starts with the books that you get from the library. It starts with what you watching on TV. They ain't gonna get no black culture from The Simpsons and the Disney Channel. I'm sorry, it's not gonna happen. So that may mean you getting on the Bounce channel. That might mean you going to the library and checking out some movies. That might mean you taking the time to have them watch Rosewood. You taking out the time to have them watch the autobiography of Malcolm X. You taking out the time to do that. Not just assuming it's gonna happen by osmosis, because it ain't. Sorry. I get too riled up.
Thank you so much, Miss Asia.
No, I want to say I love where this conversation is going, and I love you guys' point of views. It's really interesting. Speaking, as you were speaking, something kind of sat with me, and I was like trying to figure out the point in where I realized that knowledge was power. And I think it was when I was in high school, and I was a sophomore in high school, and my grades were average. I didn't care about school that much. I just cared about being there, being around the girls, and just, smiling every day. I didn't know what it meant to be black or where we were as far as this race, this marathon. Until I came across a guy named Eric Thomas. You probably know him, he's a hip-hop preacher. Came across this video. It just popped up. The universe works in mysterious ways sometimes. It just popped up, and I said, I'm going to watch this video. It was a motivation video, and he said something in there. He said, you gotta be willing to sacrifice what you are for what you're willing to become. I was like, that is so deep what he just said. And I was like, okay. I was like, listen, it was like the end of the year, but I'm like, I'm gonna try this out, and I want to see how far this goes. So I was like, okay, what if I give it 120% for a whole year? Like, I have nothing to lose. I probably have my whole life to worry about after this. But for just 1 year, let me give it 120% and let me see where it goes. And I started getting all A's. And then I started being more energized. I was playing football, and, our football team became, so much big, and I became a star. And I'm like, it all started because I was willing to sacrifice who I was for who I was willing to become. And that really stuck with me because it's like, I think with our youth, we don't follow our dreams enough to want to chase them. And I think parents and our elders, and I feel like they hold a great responsibility as well to remind your child that you don't just have to be just a lawyer. You don't have to be just a doctor. You can be A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Because we're gonna need it. We're gonna need it. We're gonna need the teaching. We're gonna need everybody to get down and be there and listen. But if we're not being taught different ways to make money, then we're just gonna be thinking, okay, well, I gotta get a job just like my dad did, and I gotta be a janitor for the rest of my life, or I gotta go to school and be a lawyer because there's no outside things called entrepreneur. So, I don't know those things, but I think it's just really important to remind your child. You got a child at home, just remind them, son or daughter, what dreams are you chasing? Like, who do you want to be? I know who I want you to be. Obviously I know who I want you to be, but who do you want to be? And you guys just touched on it so much, because I'm like, wow, like I was able to put myself in your shoes and look at it from an outside point of view as well, because I have kids. And one thing is what I'm trying to do with my daughter and my son is I'm teaching them to be bilingual, because I feel like that's important. There's not a lot of like Black people here, but if we were able to communicate on a deeper level as far as communication, that would go really, really far. If, for example, if we all knew Spanish in this room, just think about the type of conversations or the type of communities we can touch because they can hear our stories. Black people, we bleed our blood. You hear our pain, as we speaking, or when your mom is speaking, when your dad is speaking, you hear it in their voice. So imagine just being able to bring another side of light to that. I just think that would be important. But another question I would have is I'm just playing devil's advocate right now. And, there's a lot of kids out there that are like, okay, yeah, Black Lives Matter. But I mean, why I feel like we're just running around in circles, and yeah, Black Lives Matter, but we would go out, we have rallies, but then what happens? We go back and we do the same thing. And it's like nobody cares about what's happened, what I'm going through, because all we care about is just coming together for one day, and we're never moving forward. So what would you say to somebody like that? Because obviously I know that, change it's slow sometimes. But what advice would you give to, a kid that's just losing it, that's just giving up hope because he doesn't see the change or she doesn't see the change herself?
If I may, Tyler Perry is a great example. He was homeless, lived in his car. When he looked up, the only thing he saw was the ceiling inside of his car. But he was determined to do better. We can't allow ourselves, well, no, let me back up. When we get into that position or into that place or space or situation where it seems hopeless and that we are helpless, think of someone like Tyler Perry, but go further back and think of someone like Rosa Parks, who sat down, and for her actions, I don't think she was thinking about the fact that her feet were tired. I think she thought about the fact that her soul was tired. You see, she went to jail, all that kind of stuff, just for refusing to do what society was telling her she had to do. We can't just do those kinds of things. People will want us to do some weird stuff. Black Lives Matter, yeah, that was, it came, I mean, the civil rights movement came and sort of went, and there was a long gap between civil rights movement and Black Lives Matter. That's true. Heroes were not there during that time period. We didn't have a lot of people to really look up to and say, well, I want to be like that when I grow up. That's my reason for doing what I'm doing. But sometimes we have to figure out that just to get from point A to point B, it's a long way around. It's a rough road. It's a high mountain. You have to persevere. You have to do some things that you don't want to do. And see, in my opinion, young Black people don't have the right to say, I'm not going to vote. Now, I don't care who's in the room. I don't care who's listening. Because so many people, I was just listening to something that about Medgar Evers. They just celebrated his death 50 years ago, shot down in his driveway of his house about voting. So many people have died just for us to get the right to vote. So we can't squander that right. And I know right now in this whole climate that we're living in, they're trying to turn the clock back on all that. But all I can say is just don't let them. Just don't let them. Don't let it happen. I don't care what you have to do to stop that nonsense. Just don't let it happen. You're strong. I can tell that. Your son over there, he's got a future. And he's got a mama that's teaching him stuff. Our parents didn't teach us a lot of stuff. My first 4 years of school, fortunately, was in all-Black schools. Like your son, the school's integrated. I was one of 2 Blacks in my class, so I understand. But those that want to just give up and say that we can't do it, we can't make it, why should I? Because if you do your DNA, you'll find that you're descendants from kings and queens. You're descendants from Martin Luther Kings. You're descendants from Rosa Parks. You're descendants from people like Tyler Perry and Oprah Winfrey and others in our society. Jim Brown, you were an athlete? Do a study on Jim Brown. Bad dude. Do a study on him. There were so many before us and came along during that time and before. Don't give up. Just don't give up. Don't give in. Do what you have to do. Yeah, I know that being Black may not be the current trend, to say, well, I'm Black and I'm proud. James Brown stuff came out with that. That's old. Some folks say, well, that's old. I want to do today and all that. But you still have to be Black and proud today. If I were to take a picture of you and compare it to one of those kings of Kush in Africa, your pictures would be similar. So you have it in you. Live up to who you are. I'm through.
Thank you so much. That was well said. History of Chambers. Last discussion, Miss Asia, to wrap it up for us.
I'll wrap it up, and I want to make sure you get time to speak too. So
It's
I'm
okay.
gonna try to let me pass it to
As future legacy, I think it's important for me to find balance and listen and learning, so I can take this information and broadcast it when I know I need to make spaces. When people call me saying, we need your help. People say, oh, Michaela, we gotta solve this. I gotta know how. So I'll listen and learn. Asia?
I should do more of that. I want to just reiterate that these things have been done already, I believe, in cycles in history. And again, they was barbecuing long before Juneteenth was a holiday. They've been, we're a tribal people. We've always relocated. We've had differences within even though we all may operate under this guise of being black in America, we all have families and know that you could have a conversation about politics and everybody be divided, fight, cuss each other out, come back next year like nothing happened. So we have to honor the differences that we share, and we have to honor the experiences that we share as well. When it comes to activism and Black Lives Matter, I want to just say that sometimes the truth is black folks can be anti-black. And we don't want to always talk about that, but it was the mayor pro tem in Antioch, after all of that went down in Antioch with the police department, that she said publicly, we have issues within our community with black leaders that don't necessarily align with the values of those that are activists, with the values of those that are the younger generation and represent more of we have the nonviolent approach, and then we have the by any means necessary approach, and then we have everybody in between, and we got people that gotta work it out, then we got people that are gonna work it out. I mean, like, it's all of this intertwined, and it's all part of the reality of what we represent here in a country that has never really been supportive of us having power. Hello, whether it's political, whether it's educational, whether it's wealth. We have to understand where we are. And there were many of us, as you know, who are familiar, back when Marcus Garvey came. So you talk about Booker T. Washington. Well, Marcus Garvey was talking about go back to Africa because they ain't gonna ever respect you here. While, you know, Frederick Douglass talking about, oh, turn the cheek and your fellow man and this. So it's always been dissension. I just want to sum that up real nice. Like, but at the end of the day, the common goal is freedom. The common goal is justice. The common goal is to advance as a people. So we can get lost in the weeds about the politics, but at the same time, we have to just, again, honor that the destination is what's important, right? Progress is what's important, and how are we measuring that? I want to go back to this idea of education when it comes to activism. So you mentioned Rosa Parks. They didn't have no internet, no Twitter, no nothing. They shut the whole bus down. Bus finna be bankrupt. How? Because they coordinated, they made sure everybody got to work, they made sure there was some snacks involved. How were they able to do that without Instagram? They talked with each other. They knew their neighbors. They had community. I want to go back to this idea of Tyler Perry and this idea of like resistance. Like, we all have this intergenerational drive if you can tap into it. So there's a guy named Yanga who was a slave from Gambia, if I believe. He was brought all the way to Mexico. No education, no weapons. He was able to lead a whole slavery revolt against the Spanish. Over a decade, this man did this. There's a statue of him. Even though we may live in a predominantly Latina culture or area, they don't know about Yanga, but some of them do. Some of them know our history, sometimes better than us. A lot of our white allies and our other allies of different cultures and ethnicities know more about our history than we do. So it goes back to enriching yourself. What this has been done already. You look at people like Denmark Vesey and Nat Turner, people no education, right? You look at Eli Whitney, the cotton gin, all of this stuff. You think about the whiskey, what they found, the guy, Jack Daniels. People, it's like if you are working a plantation day in and day out, eventually you're going to be like, you know, I'm tired of bending over same time doing this cotton. I'm tired of drying out this tobacco. Eventually your innovation, its spirit, its genius is going to click. So we have to honor that. This is before the internet and books and all that. We have to honor that people built buildings so that the sun would align and it would light up the building at a certain time. It's in us. It continues to be in us. If we're distracted, if we on the video game, like he's saying and all that, we can't find that same vision, or we can't tap necessarily into that same vision. So you have to focus, and you have to know your worth, and you have to look at history and see these patterns. I'm going to end with Justin and Justin. If you all watch the news, I was watching 3 Newses. Those young men in Tennessee, they stormed the state capitol. They had a megaphone. These 2 young men, Justin Preston, I believe, the other one has the last name start with a P. They came into the state building with a megaphone to get the attention of those elected officials. And what did they end up doing? They tried to basically take away their positions as senators or representatives of the state. So that's the same thing that had been happening, right? 1960, whatever, and it's 2023. So I just want you to just understand that this has continuously been done. Black Lives Matter is nothing new, it's just a different name.
Thank
They
you.
said time
Can
is
I
up.
add something, one thing right quick?
Yeah.
CRT,
Critical
critical
race theory.
That's enough said.
Daryl Bell.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming tonight, guys. Just remember you to be groundbreaking, to have space for the elders to understand that it takes balance in order to make sure we become the legacy we want to see and the change needed in these perilous times. Thank you for tuning in to Black Presence, an intimate discussion with unheard voices, the Salinas edition. I hope to see you at the Salinas Juneteenth event next Saturday, June 17th at 1 p.m. And again, in 2 weeks for our next episode. Thank you.